So back in October, we did the roughly close to 60 student trainings. Um, what were your thoughts as the students participated in the training?
I thought the students were very excited when they were given the opportunity to come in and be trained as a peer mediator. Um, like when we just sent out the survey, I personally was kind of shocked. Like, wow, this student really wants to do the peer mediation, and you know what? Like, I'm not going to judge. I'm just going to say yes. You're in,
Right.
and let's see what you think about it. And you know what? Like, I thought the training was really good, especially when you had Yacht City there to help out and some other students there, where it was, and I believe it was a combination of middle school and high schoolers being trained
Right.
for Azusa Unified. So I thought it was really good. It went well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I concur. The students, we had an overwhelming response, and it wasn't easy to get students to come to anything on a Saturday. So having that many students in the cafeteria that day was so special, and we could feel the energy. We could feel the transformation. We could feel the learning going in, and especially when the students had the opportunity to practice scenarios, they really enjoyed that, and it was really eye opening for them. And you created a space that was welcoming and safe and easy for the students to try out stuff and raise their hand, which they hadn't done, as Oscar mentioned, in the main stage in a year. And so that was an amazing moment for them to come together and unify around conflict and peer mediation.
Yeah, it was for us, it was exciting because one, we hadn't been in person training at all. So we were super excited, and the
Yeah.
energy was definitely positive from the students. So that was a lot of fun too.
And one of the fun things also was like Carol mentioned, the them actually going through a scenario.
Mhm.
There was one time where Mr. Acosta and I we got into a fight, like a verbal altercation, something about two baseball teams, and the kids thought that we were having a real life fight. And at that particular moment, they started taking out their phones like typical teenagers do,
Right.
and then we kind of told them, like, okay, now we need some people to kind of mediate the situation. And you know what? And those students did a really, really good job. And I think, yeah, City even stepped in. It's like, well, okay, so this is what it probably looks like in the middle school or in the high school. So
Mhm.
let's sit down and let's get to work. And I think that was pretty eye opening.
Yeah, I agree. Well, they got to see it, in some ways, a role play in real time. So
Mhm.
absolutely. Mr. Scott, how about you? What were your thoughts regarding the training and how the students participated?
I think that once we started doing the scenarios, the kids really got into it. When we're talking about the background information of it, I think it was a hit or miss. Some kids were listening, some kids were kind of drifting off. And I think that Oscar and Adrian, when they did that role play and were antagonistic one towards the other, that woke everybody up. Now the two, I get the idea of doing two Saturdays for expediency's sake, and that's good. But we also need something that I've noticed at Foothill this year is it has to be ongoing.
Yeah.
And I know that when Oscar did this at Foothill, there were weekly trainings which he would do. And so it was kind of, we had two all day trainings. Now you're on your own. And we do need that follow up on a continual basis. So, but for expediency's sake, getting it done, we needed it at that time. Foothill had a lot of issues. I'm sure other schools did as well that helped tamp things down.
Hmm.
But I just like to stress the need for ongoing um, sessions, visits, trainings, whatever you want to call them.
Right. So yeah, we usually call those like refresher. So for instance, we would do another refresher with the group to kind of keep them in the zone, so to speak, with curriculum, with the process, and just being consistent. So yeah, Mr. Acosta, how about you?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, you joined us.
I
Welcome.
did. Trying to get used to this fancy technology. I feel like I'm
Right.
on jumbo jet. I'm like, where are the controls? What happens if I push this button? As far as with regards, the question is what I thought about the training, correct?
Yes.
I agree with everyone's opinions. I agree with Steve. Not that the background information was helpful or good. I think it's a lot. A lot of the language. Some of the kids had trouble kind of relating to because it was high level vocabulary. Even to your adult that might attend a week long session, it could be difficult. So, once Oscar and I, we talked and we thought that some of the students, might be, drifting off. We just let's make a real thing. The kids were excited to join peer mediation because they were going to mediate. And what a better way to mediate than to get in a conflict? And I just, we just told each other, let's just go with it. Hopefully, Carol could intervene by the time the first blow gets thrown. I never got to that, but it was very high energy. I mean, we loved it. We had lunch after and we were laughing. But then the kids took out the phones and Oscar and I were like looking at them like, no, put them away. This is not real. Relax. It's not a real fight. But once we got that, once we accomplished that, the students were able to see this is what it might be like. This is what we might have to do. And, we had to kind of show some resistance to Carol because not everyone's going to want peer mediation. And then people are going to be heated up and seeing red, where the mediator might not be able to get to them, the way, we do it in training. So I thought it was very successful. And after that, I think the hunger and the confidence and the drive to want to conduct one of these was more present.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. If I can ask, what has been some of the takeaways? I know, Mr. Scott, you were saying that we probably need to continue some refreshers around the skills and techniques. What are some other takeaways in regards to over the last year, or not quite a year yet, since the students have been trained, that you've kind of learned around program implementation, any challenges that you guys may be facing in regards to on either end, the peer mediators wanting to mediate or students wanting to mediate? Can you share a little bit about that?
So one takeaway that I got at Ellington, we're still behind on all of the schools because the school's the last one that really hasn't gone into the peer mediation. The benefit is that when Carol was here with me, we were both trained. And ironically, one takeaway that we both got on it, that we were able to introduce peer mediation, not necessarily to the students, although some of them were mediated through Carol and I, not through the students. Carol and I, we found to use peer mediation to mediate between staff conflicts. And that happened a couple of times where Carol and I, we had to be the peer mediators using our skills that we learned in the training to mediate between staff that were pretty hot and heated. And, I looked at Carol and I told her, I said, it's not supposed to be this way for the kids, not for staff.
Yeah.
But had we not experienced that training, we couldn't have handled it, but it would have been a little bit more of a challenging experience for us.
It wouldn't have been growth centered, and it wouldn't have been, where the opportunity for them, those adults, to come to their own conclusions and work through their conflict, but that base, like he said, was so important for us to create a safe space, to be very clean in how we were handling it and make sure we were staying on point. We didn't go into some other realm. So it did serve us well as adults, as administrators together. But from the site standpoint, what made a big difference for Slauson, so was there a good half of the year, was having teachers trained. That really made a difference because there was an embracing of the program immediately. And so when we went to implement, using Oscar's model from Foothill, we got these kids trained. Now what? How do we keep that juice going? What do we do? And he said, well, I would bring them in on a Friday during homeroom, and we go over a lesson, maybe school tools, or we do a practice scenario, or we do something, or we just have a community circle. We just kept it alive. We said, okay, we got to do that. And Slauson Middle School happens to have 24 peer mediators, which is a pretty decent group. Having the counselor involved, having the teacher say, yeah, you guys got to go. Don't worry about what's going on in homeroom. This is super important. We want to build this. Made a big difference to keep that program going. And the students, again, just like us, when we go to trainings, they get their nice notebook and they put it wherever, and that was the end of it. And we said, no, that's a living thing. Bring that in every time. We're going to go through it. We're going to take a look at some of those things when you're getting stuck. When you're running through a scenario, what's really going on here? Look at your conflict iceberg here, or, look at this or look at that. And it was really telling for them, and they were able to grow in their own, development of how to resolve a conflict. And now that I'm here at Foothill, we're taking that model right over here and doing the same thing with Steve and his group. And tomorrow morning, yep, you better bet, we're going to be together during homeroom and practicing those scenarios and talking it out, looking back at our notebook, so that it becomes integrated into their lives. It's not just something they went through, it's something that they live.
Yeah.
I think another thing we took out was, the need to have some guidance, some type of sheet. And I know sometimes the trainings, the videos show us just to get a sheet and start writing. But for some of those students don't know, how to engage in it. I sat with Steve and we came up with a generic sheet, and then I showed it to Steve, and Steve was like, hey, I like this. Why don't we put these columns and make it a little bit more user friendly? And it seemed to work. And then we just changed the logos to share with the schools. I don't know if the other schools are still using it, but it's been effective, and we've been using it at Ellington. When the counselor, who's also trained in peer mediation, not through WJC, we've mediated between some kids. We just haven't extended to go through to have the students do that yet, but it's been good. Some of the parents, when we call the parents and we told them that we solved the problem through mediation, some of them got a little defensive and asking, is this approved? Do you even have permission? Is this legal? And then I explained that we have a contract with the 60 Unified, and we've been fully trained. And although we don't have kids trained at Ellington, we have been trained, and they calmed down and they welcome the fact that they were spoken to, but and not necessarily dealt with through suspension or other means.
Right. Absolutely. Isn't that interesting? Oh, I have a comment after. I want to hear from Oscar in your thoughts on looking back over the last, maybe 6 months. Well, since October, really. What are your thoughts or your feelings around the takeaway from the year?
So I have 2 takeaways that are still fresh in my mind. One of them is that our high school peer mediators, especially last year, they mentioned that during the training that they had with you, Shaune, and Arturo, that a lot of the strategies that you taught them in those 1 hour long after school webinars, is that they're using those strategies with their parents.
Oh, wow.
I remember that clearly. It's like, like one of the students said, like, I'm able to discuss with my mother when I'm feeling upset, and I use I statements versus, going full on yelling at each other. And that's actually very good. And one of our students who is a freshman at GCU now, he kind of said, like, yeah, I'm looking forward to, like, I've actually used some of these strategies to help some of my friends who are having issues within the group try to clear up the air. So that's really good. So we're giving them tools to use as adults. And then one of the things that just happened recently with one of my peer mediations is that students have to understand that peer mediation is not always going to give you an answer. There was a very, very difficult peer mediation that was done between 2 girls that were really close friends, but are not friends anymore. And a question was asked, and there was absolutely no answer to it. So at that particular moment, we had to have a discussion as to what are some of the agreements that we can abide by to ensure that the issues don't continue to flare up, because there's obviously nobody's going to be the answer that the one particular student was looking for didn't exist.
Mm,
So we have to understand that hey, conflict resolution, peer mediation, it leads to agreements, not 100% solutions. And sometimes, like Steve, I think at Foothill, Steve had to stop a peer mediation because it was going off the rails, and students were not abiding by the rules, and Steve,
mm.
as the adult, he had to stop it. But he can talk more about that one if he wishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you, Oscar. Mr. Scott, do you have
Yeah,
any thoughts? Yes.
no, I agree with Oscar about with the uh, recruiting. So I think that
Mhm.
next year we know the students better, or virtually that was just a disaster. So I think that we'll be able to go out and recruit. In fact, I'm doing registration right now. I finished registration for our seventh graders going into eighth, and I'm doing registration with the sixth graders coming in. And both of them on the registration form, I asked them, are you interested in the peer mediation program?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of explained it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how many people are interested in it. I just want to get back to the ongoing training. We were doing training, and then it just didn't happen anymore. And then Carol came in, and we started doing training, and I saw the fruits of that right away. I had a peer mediation between two kids, and they really did well after the kind of refresher training, or whatever terms we're going to use it. And so that's something that I just want to emphasize is extremely important. Doing those on a weekly basis or monthly basis or whatever it is, we just have to do those because it's an acquired skill. You just have to practice it over and over again.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, so I'm looking forward to next year seeing what's happened. And I think that if we get a strong group, and as they go on, next year's group will be seventh graders and then eighth graders. Next year's seventh grade group will be key because they will be the ones going into our consolidated middle school. So I'm hoping that that we can really work with them, and that they can be the leaders then when all four middle schools are combined.
Great. Thank you. One of the things I was going to kind of add, I think, Carol, it was along the lines of something that you said. It's really demystifying what conflict resolution is, to sometimes students, and then of course the adults, right? The training sometimes can be, that first day, it's very high, a lot of content, right? But all that content is applied into the process on the second day of training. But what I have seen and I have learned, is with the adults, sometimes it's like when the adults were saying, Adrian, to you, is this legal? I mean, it's something that is it's simple, these skills and these techniques, right? But we don't talk about them. And we don't, and we, and we don't really share them, and sometimes it's kind of difficult for parents to understand what this process is.
Well, I think what happens in that case, and what I saw through that experience of those comments, are two things. One, usually when parents are upset because situations involve other students with their own children, they basically want heads to roll. They want someone to pay for hurting their child.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to look at a peer mediation. They want to know if someone got suspended or someone really was dealt with for doing, or for whatever reason that they think
Mm-hmm.
that their child was violated. And number two, they have never heard of it, and the idea of an adult being in a room, having a discussion, there's always that fear: are you coercing my child? Are you making them feel guilty or pressuring them to feel a certain way? So yeah, they're going to feel a little concerned as to, why are you talking to my kid and about what?
Mm-hmm.
And what are you making them say, or whatever, when I told them that there was an agreement and a little contract, one of the parents was very apprehensive of, what is this contract? And is the district office getting it? No, it's just between them. At the end of the year, or if they leave schools, it gets shredded, and it's a good thing. It's just while we're here at school. they start to feel a little bit more comfortable. But there's a little bit of resistance, and so you have to take that time to de-escalate, that reluctancy that they might have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, thank you, Adrian. Well, we have done a lot of work together over the last since October, I'll say. Actually, over the last 2 years, not just since October. I think October was when we just kind of started our real journey when training the students. One of the reasons why we wanted people to hear from Azusa is this is a unique experience where an entire district has made the choice to reimagine how we deal traditionally with discipline. And if you had some words for people out there in other school communities, what would be some of anything that you would say to them to kind of let them know how powerful this work is from each of where you sit? What would be something that you could to say to them, not necessarily to convince them, but get them maybe to think about ABCs? What are some things that you would suggest to them? I'll say that.
Well, go if you can. That's all I could think. Go if you can, because it is it's not transactional. It's transformational, and you have to know that. You have to talk to somebody who has just come out of ABCs of training, because that's what happened to me. As I talked to Adrian and Oscar immediately after they finished when it was online, and I said, "What is this thing that you've done? What is this? I got to be a part of it." And when it came the next year, I'm like, sign me up. I do not want to miss this. This is amazing. It's going to change the culture on your campus for the better. It's going to change the way that students talk to each other. It's going to change their empathy and their compassion for each other. That's what it's going to do. And you're going to see a lot of growth very quickly at an age where you don't expect it. I mean, we're dealing with middle schoolers. They don't have a lot of patience to hear the other side all the time. They have a very clear idea of what is the truth and what is the way that the story goes. And peer mediation allows them to hear the other side of the story. And then they say, oh, I thought of it that way. Huh. Wow. Maybe I can see that other person's side, and that helps with the relationship after the rupture, after the event. That's where it shows up on your campus. Big difference for everyone.
Well, thank you, Carol. Anyone else want to chime in?
I would say give your students the opportunity to be leaders in your school community. And I'm basing this off of my middle school experience and high school experience. Don't think that the adults that have to be in the peer mediation are running it. Like, we are not. I have the students that are doing peer mediation here in my office while I am on my computer doing my work, and I have the students just sitting there talking through the issue. It is amazing when the students get trained how well they're able to just run that little meeting so that they can just listen and talk to each other. And ultimately, as the credentialed adult in the room, we basically disappear. The kids don't even notice that we're sitting there. And that's the amazing part. And then when you're actually listening to the conversations, there's just a source of pride, because you know that these kids have taken ownership of the program, and this is what it's really about. It's about kids helping other kids. If you're a teacher, if you're an administrator, if you're a parent, you know that whatever you tell your kids, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. But when the voices that they're hearing are peers their own age or students that they see on campus, they really do take it to heart. And at that particular moment, that's when those words become powerful, and that's when you see the behavior and the culture just start to shift.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a shift overnight. It's going to take a little while, but give those students the opportunity to help out in some minor issues. I'm not talking about issues that are going to lead to suspensions or fights. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the little minor drama, the little rumors that start here and there that can be peer mediated. Because ultimately, those are sometimes the issues that take the longest inside the classroom and as an administrator, or even with a counselor like Mr. Scott. Those are the ones that take a long time, but have your peer mediators just handle those little situations, and it'll clear up a lot of your time too.
Mhm.
Awesome. Excellent. Adrian or Mr. Scott, you guys have any other things to add? This is the last comment, and then we're going to go back to the live stage.
So I think, you know, with regards to peer mediation, it's a good program. It's a good training to attend. I know Carol was, piggyback on what Carol said. Kids have this impatience, to talk to each other. A lot of times, it's the adults who lack that patience also, and they want to go punitive right away. And this not only adds another toolkit as to how to mediate conflicts instead of getting punitive right away, detention, suspension, etc. It also allows you to be a better listener, because a lot of times these kids in these conflicts is because they take place because there is a conflict and they don't know, they're not trained with the training. I mean, look at, we as adults are going to training on how to mediate and resolve conflicts. Now imagine, the child, at their cognitive state, on their ability to be able to solve conflict. It's not to where our level should be. So a lot of times they just want to be heard. And attending the meeting and the training allows us to prepare and learn how to listen to them. And then when you listen to them and you start seeing some of the commonalities, it allows you to be better prepared on how to resolve those conflicts. When Carol and I, we mediated between our adult colleagues, you would be surprised that the conflicts that we listened to were the same, and not to demean or imply anything, but they were the same that the kids have, except with older bodies.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a little harder because, when we had that training, one of them had the attitude like, okay, this is kind of lame, like, why are we having this? But it was necessary and it resolved some things. And, Carol and I received kudos because we addressed it. We weren't known as one of these administrators that, why go to them? They don't do anything about it anyway.
Mm.
That is the culture that we wanted to project here at Ellington when we were together, that there's a situation, no matter how uncomfortable it is, we're going to address it. Because of the peer mediation, we were a little uncomfortable because we didn't know the reception of the adults, but we were ready for that and we were able to counter it and see it through. So attend it. It's not going to be a miracle fix. You're not going to come out an expert. The only way, as Steve said, to get involved in them and do them, and that's the only way you're going to be better at it. City, she had the talent and she had all the skills needed, but City became City by doing a lot more and consistent sessions, which made her that much more better.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Mr. Scott, any last words?
No, I'm going to agree with Adrian. I think that it's a great program. But to say it's transformative, that, it changed entire school culture, I think it adds to the change of school culture. But to say that this is the only thing that changed the school culture would, all the parent meetings we have, all the times we're out between classes, all the relationships teachers are building with kids, all those things are part of it. This is a great tool. This is a part of it. And it's a great part of it. One thing that I do, and I don't know if it's in training, but after each peer mediation with the peer mediators, we debrief. What do you guys think went right? What do you guys think? What were you feeling that didn't go right? And something I think Oscar said was, some of the kids say, I don't think that they're going to, I don't know if we solved the problem. We did the best we can. We signed a contract. Now they have to enact it. We're limited in what we can do too. But it's a really good program. There's no doubt about it.
Well, great, you guys. Thank you all so very much for being a part of PMI. Of course, we can't focus our work if it wasn't for you guys and what you guys are doing in Azusa. So thank you all so very much.